Are you in the process of caring for an elderly parent? Do you have a parent that maybe you haven't had connection with in many years, but your parent is poor and they can't afford their medical care or their housing or even their food? You may have a responsibility to care for them financially and legally. Filial law applies to your financial responsibility for your parents as they age and if they're unable to take care of themselves. There are filial laws in over half of the United States, and it varies by state what is included in the filial law, what your responsibilities are. So before you start writing checks and paying for bills that are not necessarily yours, check your state's local laws. And because they change, I'm hesitant to say which laws apply in which states, because there's I don't know when you're going to watch this video, and I don't know what the laws will be at that time, but they do exist and it is something to be aware of. So just check the laws that are specific for your state, because they do vary by state, and most of them are rarely enforced. That doesn't mean never enforced, so you do want to know what they are. And I am on the job. I am working. It's a hard life. In this video, I want to go over some of the financial resources that are available to you as a child of a parent that can no longer take care of themselves for a medical reason. First, I wanted to share my own experience. I moved back to California in 2017 because my mother was taking care of my 95-year-old grandmother. My mother was 71 at the time, and my grandmother had dementia. So I'm very familiar with how dementia ravages a person and turns them into somebody that's unrecognizable to their family over time. It was becoming very difficult for my mother. My mother kept saying that taking care of my grandmother was killing her and that she needed help. So I moved back to California to help my mother care for my grandmother. When I got here, my mom was doing the bulk of the caregiving, and she didn't want me to help with the caregiving. I think she really just wanted me there for moral and emotional support. She said that caring for grandma, that's what we called her, grandma, she said caring for grandma was too horrible and she didn't want to burden me with it. So she did the diaper changes, she did the feeding, she did the bathing. I would go and sit with grandma, but at that point, grandma didn't know who I was anymore. And we had to really watch her because she would do things that just didn't even make sense. She'd make messes every time she had an opportunity. She couldn't walk anymore, so she was in a wheelchair. And eventually we couldn't even get her up in the wheelchair. My mother had been caring for my grandmother at this point for about 10 years. And while she complained about it pretty much the whole time, I had no idea how hard it was. I thought my mom was whining. But when I was faced with the reality of what the care entailed, I realized that I really should have come sooner and helped my mom because she needed the help. I had been back probably 6 months when my mom got a real bad cold. And I kept asking her if we needed to go to the doctor and get her checked out because I was afraid she might have pneumonia. So it got to the point where she did agree that she needed to go in and get checked out because she also feared that she might have pneumonia. So I took her to the ER, and they admitted her. They said, yes, she does have pneumonia, and they kept her overnight. Unfortunately, what we thought was pneumonia was actually lung cancer, and it was terminal. There was no hope of a cure. They basically gave us the devastating news that with treatment, my mom may last another year, and without it, she wouldn't last more than 3 months. So while we were processing that, I still had my grandmother at home to take care of. And my mother had resisted putting her in a nursing home because my grandmother had always begged her not to. And her biggest fear was that if she put her in the nursing home, it would kill her. But faced with 2 elderly family members in the house and a full-time job, there was no way that I could care for both of them. Quitting my job wasn't an option because we needed the money for the household income. And I was the only one with a job. My mom hadn't worked in years because of the care for my grandmother, and my grandmother was 95 years old. And putting her in a nursing home, the money that she had coming in was going to disappear, and it was going to go straight to the nursing home. So I was tasked with the job of finding Grandma a nursing home, which I did. Grandma had savings, so Medicare didn't cover her nursing home. We had to completely deplete her savings before Medicare kicked in. And it was $5,500 a month, if I remember correctly. So I did arrange for Grandma to go into a nursing home, and then I began the care of my mother. My mom had chemo appointments, she had immunotherapy appointments, she had radiation appointments, she had heart doctor appointments, lung doctor appointments. She had a bowel obstruction. She lasted probably 9 more months, and I cared for her those times. One of the reasons that I had the business that I have today, the pet care business, was because it was flexible. I could drop my mom off at appointments, and I could do dog walks once I got my mom back home. And that's what I did. Another thing that was available to me that I learned about later on in the process was California has a program. I'll link the program for California, but they do pay for caregivers, even if they're family members. And so if you have a family member that you're caring for, check with your state's programs, because California offers paid caregiving. Now, they don't pay you for every hour that you actually work. They look at what the condition is that your family member has, and they have a rating system. And so for my mom's cancer diagnosis, they allotted a certain number of hours per day that they felt that she would need care. And it was primarily for feeding, bathing, light housework, that sort of thing. And so they did pay me, at the time, I think it was $8 or $9 an hour for a few hours a day. But it was better than nothing. So check with your state and see if they have programs like that too. For California, in order to be qualified for that, there was a training program that I had to go through, and I think they ran a background check on me as well. But I will link the California program in the description. So that was available. And then I kept working because we needed the household income to keep the mortgage going. The next thing my mother did after I found a nursing home for my grandmother was my mom went to an attorney. She went to an estate planning attorney, and she drafted her will, her advanced health care directive, powers of attorneys for finances, and a revocable living trust. She wanted to protect her assets because she knew it was time. It made her nervous to do this, but she did do the necessary estate planning to protect her assets, to avoid probate, and to take care of her affairs. She also prepaid for cremation with Neptune Society, and she was funny. At the time when she paid for her cremation, she also paid for my grandmother's, and she paid for mine. And while she sought an attorney, she also urged me to take care of my affairs and draft a will at this. So basically, we both did our estate planning together because it's just something that you should do if you have assets or heirs. And I didn't have very many assets at the time, but my mom had told me that she had intended to leave me the condo so that I would have a home when she was gone. And she wanted me to have the condo. So we both drafted our wills and our trusts and all of that sort of thing at the same time. We didn't end up using every document that she drafted, but I did end up using the medical power of attorney during her abdominal surgery. She had an adverse reaction after she had a bowel obstruction, and it was a reaction to the medication, and she was hallucinating. And the night after she had surgery, actually the morning after it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, the hospital called me and told me that my mother had she had crawled out of the bed over the guardrails, and she had put her clothes on, and she had her purse on her arm, and she was getting ready to walk home. She had had abdominal surgery probably 3 hours prior, and they wanted to know what to do. And I told them to keep her there because she wasn't in any condition to come home. But she was having these hallucinations where she thought the hospital was being bombed and she wanted to come home. And so I had to use the medical power of attorney and keep her in the hospital against her will while she was having hallucinations. Now, having these documents makes it possible to care for them. It doesn't mean they're going to like it, but I was glad that I had it. It took my mom probably a month to realize that she was having hallucinations and that I was acting in her best interest. She was very unhappy with me at the time, though. But because I had those documents in hand, I was able to keep her in the hospital so that she could recover. But she was mad. And if you have an elderly parent that has dementia or some other medical issue that impairs their thinking, you may need these documents. Now, another thing that my mother did to make the banking easier was when she and grandma were living alone together, they had joint banking accounts. And this is not a recommendation because you know your family and you know if you could trust somebody or not, and I would hate to advise you to add a child or a family member to your bank account if you feel like they might steal from you. They had total trust in each other, and it did make it easier to be joint on the accounts if you have 100% complete and total trust. When I moved home, my mom added me to her bank account because she did trust me. And it did make it easier to handle her affairs when she could no longer get to the bank or pay her bills. I was able to do it for her, and I had the full rights and responsibilities to do that. If you have other children that you want to leave money to, you don't want to do that, because once you add somebody as a joint owner on the bank account, then they're an equal owner of the asset. So this will work in some cases, but not all. And every case is individual. For us, it worked. There wasn't a lot of cash in the account. It was basically where their Social Security checks got deposited. And they had enough, Social Security doesn't go very far. So it was enough to cover the bills that they had. They lived very frugally. My mom, clipped coupons and she shopped the sales, and she's where I learned a lot of my money saving ideas from. But it would not be if she had millions of dollars in the bank, it would not be something that you would advise. Another thing that my mother did before I moved back was she had made friends in her condo complex. Her neighbors were her friends, and they lived right next door. And if she had to leave the house and go to the market and she couldn't take grandma with her, she would make arrangements with them, and they would keep an eye on grandma for her, because my grandma did get to the point where she could not be left alone. She would walk out the front door and she would go missing. And there were a couple times where she had made it out the door, and my mom had a dozen neighbors helping her look for grandma. So you definitely want to avoid having situations like that. But having a network of people that you can lean on and get help from emotionally and in person is invaluable. My mom had that network, and she taught me how to make friends like that. And a lot of those friends that she had in the condo complex are now my friends. And I cannot stress the importance strongly enough of having a network of people that you can rely on when your parents are getting older. And then the final thing that I would like to add is, as much as we don't want to put our family members in nursing homes, when the care for them becomes overwhelming and it's simply too much, there does come a time when the nursing home is an appropriate choice. And if you're faced with that, don't beat yourself up too much for it. There comes a point when all of us need more help than our family can give us. And that's just part of life. So if you're at that point where you're afraid that they're not safe because you simply can't watch them 24 hours a day. There were times when my mom would be asleep, and with dementia patients, they get sundowners. And before my grandmother lost her mobility, she would start pacing the house and wandering around at night. And my mom would wake up, and my grandmother would be standing over her bed and asking her, where family members were that hadn't ever lived there. You know, she was just so confused. And if your safety is at risk, or their safety is at risk, then the nursing home may be an appropriate choice, and that's okay. Give yourself some grace and know that you're doing the best that you can. Check your local resources. Check your city, your county, your state resources. There are a number of resources out there, but you may have to dig for them. And I hope that this video finds somebody that needs it. And I hope this helps you. And until next time, I hope you have a great day.